Hello, I'm Andrew Sarris, former film critic for The Village Voice and the author of several of the seminal works of journalism that focus on the auteur theory. I am also the author of Directors and Directions as well as Politics and Cinema. I am also an esteemed professor at Columbia. I could go on, of course.
Are you also the Grand Poobah of the Water Buffalo Lodge? We don't have all day, Andy. Okay folks, I'm Pauline Kael, film critic for The New Yorker. Most people know I'm not Andy's biggest fan.
Yes, as my wife, Molly, learned when she invited you to our wedding.
What? I RSVP'd.
Yes, you certainly did. By saying no thanks, I'll go to Molly's next wedding.
Haha, I crack myself up.
Yet, truth to tell, we never much liked each other. Pauline, I first read your prose in 1961 in Film Culture, a year before I had any idea what you looked like. You wrote like a Berkeley babe who was bringing personalized and impressionistic sex to film criticism.
Was that the same period when masculinity looked so great and important, but art was something talked about by posers and phonies and sensitive feminine types?
No, that was the period when you were having babies while I was studying Godard, Hitchcock, and Rossellini. Pauline. You know, when we met for the first time in New York, I was surprised that you looked and were older and completely unlike the female fantasy I had constructed from your writings.
And I was surprised your lover let you leave the house to meet me.
Oh, nice. A homophobic innuendo thrown in for good measure. As far as I know, there's no definition of the auteur theory in the English language. That is, by any American or British critic.
Can we conclude that, in England and in the United States, the auteur theory is an attempt by adult males to justify staying inside the small range of experience of their boyhood and adolescence?
Obviously, the auteur theory cannot possibly cover every vagrant charm of the cinema.
Whatever. It's perfectly obvious that the director is the key person who has to coordinate the elements of the movie, but it is also true that he needs good collaborators.
So, how do you tell the genuine director from the quasi-chimpanzee? You recognize an auteur because after a given number of films a pattern is established.
It may be necessary to point out to auteur critics that repetition without development is decline.
Cavi much? The first premise of the auteur theory is the technical competence of a director as a criterion of value.
Sometimes the greatest artists in the medium bypass or violate the simple technical competence that is so necessary for hacks.
A great director has to be at least a good director.
Really? That seems less the premise of a theory than a commonplace judgment.
By the auteur theory, if a director has no technical competence, no elementary flair for the cinema, he is automatically cast out from the pantheon of directors.
The greatness of a director like Cocteau has nothing to do with mere technical competence. His greatness is in being able to achieve his own personal expression and style.
But the way a film looks and moves should have a relationship to the way a director thinks and feels.
I hope your humility does not camouflage your double-edged argument. Go ahead. Tell us the rest of this stupid theory.
The second premise of the auteur theory is the distinguishable personality of the director.
The smell of a skunk is more distinguishable than the perfume of a rose. Does that make it better?
Lovely analogy, Pauline. Over a group of films, a director must exhibit certain recurrent characteristics of style, which serve as his signature.
The critic's ideal auteur is a man who expresses himself by shoving bits of style up the crevices of the plots. If his style is in conflict with the storyline or subject matter, so much the better.
A cooker who works with all sorts of projects has a more developed abstract style than a Bergman who is free to develop his own scripts.
Cooker has a range of subject matter he can handle when he gets a good script within his range.
But Bergman's work has declined with the depletion of his ideas largely because his technique never equaled his sensibility.
What on earth does that mean?
Just that American directors are generally superior to foreign directors.
That makes no sense. Neither does your cockamamie theory. It's like buying clothes by the label. This is Dior, so it is good.
It makes perfect sense. In America, A director is forced to express his personality through the visual treatment of material rather than the literary content of material. So, American directors are better.
Ever notice that the works in which we are most aware of the personality of the director are his worst films? Like when he falls back on the devices he has already done to death.
If you have nothing else of value to add, let's go to the third premise. The third and ultimate premise of the auteur theory is concerned with interior meaning.
Are you critics honestly looking for interior meanings, or is this just some form of intellectual diddling that helps sustain your pride while you're viewing silly movies?
Honestly, interior meaning is the ultimate glory of the cinema as an art. Interior meaning is extrapolated from the tension between a director's personality and his material.
What is all this nonsense about extrapolating interior meaning from the tension between a director's personality and his movie? A competent commercial director generally does the best he can with what he's got to work with.
Oh yes. Dare I come out and say what I think it is to be the elan of the soul?
Where else should elan come from? It's like saying, a digestion of the stomach.
Should I speak slower, Pauline? Lest I seem unduly mystical, let me hasten to add that all I mean by soul is that intangible difference between one personality and another.
When a famous director makes a good movie, we look at the movie. We don't think about the director's personality. When he makes a stinker, we notice his familiar touches because there's not much else to watch.
Sometimes a great deal of corn must be husked to yield a few kernels of internal meaning.
Can we husk away the word internal? Is internal meaning any different from meaning?
Here is an example, Pauline. Listen closely.
I'm sitting right next to you. I don't think I have a choice.
So, Pauline, I recently saw Every Night at 8. One of the maddeningly routine films Raoul Walsh has directed. In one scene, George Raft is thrashing about in his sleep, revealing his inner fears and mumbling dream talk. The girl he loves comes into the room in the midst of his unconscious avowals of feeling and listens sympathetically.
Where's the tension? If you can locate some, what kind of meaning could you draw out of it except that the director is having a bad time with lousy material or material he doesn't like?
Patience, Pauline. I'm getting there. The film keeps moving along in the pleasantly unpretentious manner one would expect of Walsh until one incongruously intense scene.
But if his merit is his pleasantly unpretentious manner, which is to say that recognizing limitations in the script, he wasn't trying to do much.
May I finish? Then you might be able to grasp my point.
Right now I want to grasp a pillow and smother myself with it. Could you get more boring?
As I was saying, George Raft was thrashing about in his sleep, revealing his inner fears and mumbling dream talk. The girl he loves comes into the room and listens sympathetically.
Really, Andy? Without some commitment to Walsh as an auteur, you probably wouldn't be spending time looking at those movies.
This unusual scene was later amplified in Walsh's High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart and Ida Lupino.
You noticed that Raoul Walsh repeated an uninteresting and obvious device that he had earlier used in the worst movie.
If I had not been aware of Walsh in Every Night at 8, the crucial link to High Sierra would have passed unnoticed.
Would you not have noticed the repetition in the Walsh films without the auteur theory? You could hardly be expected to take off time from your devotional exercises with Raoul Walsh to explain why those films are worthless.
The point is that one of the screen's most virile directors employed an essentially feminine narrative device to dramatize the emotional vulnerability of his heroes.
Why is this narrative device essentially feminine? Is it more feminine to be asleep?
You miss the point. If I had not been aware of Walsh in Every Night at 8, the crucial link to High Sierra would have passed unnoticed.
God forbid.
Such are the joys of the auteur theory.
You experience joy when you recognize a pathetic little link between two Raoul Walsh pictures, but you never explain whether you think the discovery makes the pictures any better.
Well, Pauline, maybe the theory is too deep for you to understand.
Maybe it is too stupid for me to entertain. Goodbye, folks. I have had enough of this crap. Just say goodbye, Andy, and let the folks go home.